Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. This Joy Book Club edition is on pumpkin soup. If you're not familiar with the Joy Book Club, it's my monthly videos on picture books that I've read and enjoyed, plus a reading plan that's free and will enhance story time for teachers and parents. You can get that by signing up at my website for my newsletter. The link's in the description box below. When you sign up for my newsletter, you get access to all my free resources, plus regular updates when I produce new videos, new blog posts and new resources. So today is all about one of my favourite picture books of all time, Pumpkin Soup by Helen Cooper. It's a Kate Greenaway Award winner. It's a fantastic book, quite old now, and there's a series of books. But I'm just going to give you a quick walkthrough here. The plan that I've produced gives you a real overview and talks about themes and ideas and things like that. So if you want a more in-depth overview and a look at themes and ideas and questions and possible activities and reading for afterwards, sign up for my newsletter below and you'll get access to all of those things. So today the video is just walkthrough for Joy Book Club subscribers. So Pumpkin Soup, the most beautiful illustrations of a picture book. They're really soft and the characters are full of life. I think it's a really attractive looking book. It stood out to me. I've been reading it to children since I became a primary school teacher, I think. I don't know if it came out around about that time or even earlier perhaps, but I've been reading it for a very long time and it's always gone down well. It's a tale about friendship. 3 friends, the cat, the duck and the squirrel. They all live in an old white cabin in the woods and they are living really harmoniously together until one day there is a squabble. So it's a book about friendship, ultimately, and it's just a wonderful book for studying, for reading in the autumn, because there's lots of autumnal features and of course pumpkins, classic autumn fruit. They're a fruit, not a vegetable, as people might not realise. So they live deep in the woods in an old white cabin, and the book is so beautifully written. There's a real rhythmic quality to it. There's a lot of alliteration. There are fantastic vocabulary in this book because it's a really great book for studying how to use different words instead of said. When you're teaching children not to use said all the time, to use more specific and more interesting vocabulary. So deep in the woods there's an old white cabin and there's pumpkins in the garden, a good smell of soup, and at night with luck you might see a bagpiping squirrel, a bagpiping cat, a squirrel with a banjo and a small singing duck. So they live in this cabin together, they're great friends, they make music every night and they make pumpkin soup every night. And every time you read this, you're just like any really good books with food in, you just think, I'm just going to make some pumpkin soup. So they make pumpkin soup the best you've ever tasted, and they've each got their own job. So the cat slices up the pumpkin, the squirrel stirs the water, and the duck scoops in just a pipkin of salt that tips in just enough. So they make their soup and they slurp their soup and they play their song and they go to bed under a quilt which they've all made together, and it's all very lovely. Until one day, everyone is happy, or so it seems, until one day the duck decides it's his turn to stir the soup. And then they start rowing. They have the biggest row and they tell the duck he's too small and they have this big argument. And the duck leaves. He takes his little wheelbarrow, his little pumpkin in it. It's very, very cute. And he leaves. And they're very angry at first, but then they start to worry about him because he doesn't come back for breakfast or for lunch. And they go and look out in the pumpkin patch and he's not there. And then they really start to worry. So they start to feel guilty. It's a really excellent book because it will help children to think about when they've had arguments with friends, but how the arguments aren't permanent and you can make up again afterwards. So they constantly worry about him. They start to get upset. They start to think, oh, something might have happened to him. They make the soup, and of course, because the duck's not there to put in just enough salt, the soup doesn't taste good. And so they're crying and their soup's not tasty and it gets too salty because they cry into the soup, which is really sad. It's very sweet. And then they start imagining that the duck's on his own and he's wandering through this awful, like the wood with the witches and the wolves and the foxes and the bears, and they get worried, so they go out to look for him. And then they think, maybe he's fallen off a cliff. So they start imagining all these awful things. They go look for him over the cliff and they can't find him. And then they think, well, he might have found some better friends because they weren't such good friends. And then they're really sad and they go home and they just don't know what they're going to do. But when they get home, they see there is a light on in the old white cabin. And when they get in, they find someone who's also been really upset and crying. It's the little duck. And he's so pleased to see him. And even though it's late, they thought they would make pumpkin soup. And they let the duck stir and he makes a complete mess. But it's really great. So They've all made up. The soup's been burnt. They've made a mess, but they're made up and they're happy because they're friends. Until someone decides they want to play the banjo. So it just sort of comes right around again to show you that actually friendship is a cycle, isn't it? Friends fall out, they make up, they fall out, they make up. And it's a really comforting idea for children to understand that when you fall out with a friend, it's not the end of the world. So recommend Pumpkin Soup, one of my Joy Book Club picks for September, and you can get the plan for it with more detail if you click on the link below and subscribe to my newsletter. Thanks. Bye.